Welcome back to the show. Again, thanks so much for tuning in to After Further Review. I'm Jay Smith, and boy, this is an interesting. I don't know. As we've been talking about this, it's actually I've been doing some searching here while we were doing the show, and found some interesting articles that I wasn't able to find in my research I was doing earlier this week when I was planning this episode, and I think. I think numbers will change, right, as the spring moves forward. Graduation hits, and kids see where they are on the roster after spring practice. Maybe that number of what was it? We said 1,040 kids have come back to be super seniors. Maybe that number goes down a little bit, but still, as it stands now, let's go into a discussion here on what teams really can benefit from this super senior blanket waiver that the NCAA provided back in August. The first team I'm gonna bring up here is personally I think it's the most obvious pick, and I've been kind of hinting at him the whole show. And if you've listened to the past few episodes, you probably know who I'm talking about. But if I was being too cryptic, I'll just go ahead and tell you it's Iowa State. It's Iowa State. The Cyclones they were so close. They were so close to dethroning Oklahoma last year and beat them in the regular season, lost to them in the Big 12 championship. And it was really, it was hard. It was hard for Matt Campbell and the rest of his Cyclone team because I think they felt like that was their year. I think they felt like the program, the school, the community, I think they felt like, we're finally moving in the right direction, and we're building a good culture here, a good program. We're becoming consistent. We're competing consistently. That's probably the most important thing you can do, is we're competing consistently, and it just wasn't their night. It just wasn't their night when they had to play Oklahoma for the second time that season, and they lost the Big 12 championship. Now, this is a quote here from Matt Campbell when he was asked about, what are your thoughts on the super seniors and how that's going to affect your team in the fall. And he said, that he wasn't trying to pitch players on, you stay at Iowa State and, we'll keep going or whatever. He just said, we hope guys decide to come back, but you need to, for each individual player, that y'all need to make the best decision for you. And listen, you can come back and there's nothing guaranteed. You go out to practice and get an injury and you're over. It's over. But he did say, and this is a direct quote here, we'll always be better at Iowa State the older we are as a football team. I think you can remove Iowa State from that sentence. You can put any other team in the country in place of it, and it applies. It's totally accurate. We'll always be better at blank the older we are as a football team. I mean, how does that not apply to any other school? So that's where Matt Campbell was at. And fortunately for the Cyclones, a lot of their key players decided to come back and play in 2021. They retained several guys that probably could have gone to the draft. Their quarterback Brock Purdy, tight end Charlie Kohler, and linebacker Mike Rose, who actually was the 2020 Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. And again, those guys were juniors. Okay, those guys were juniors, and they were draft eligible. But they also have that group of, the super seniors who are going to play their fifth or sixth season in the fall, and they're coming off Iowa State. They're coming off their first Big 12 championship game appearance and their highest AP poll finish at number 9. From last season, right? Coming into this year, and I really feel like Matt Campbell understands the opportunity this fall is to achieve a once unthinkable goal at Iowa State in Ames, right? We could make a college football playoff. We could not only could we make a college football playoff, we could compete in a college football playoff. I really believe that. I really think Iowa State is going to do what Oklahoma has not, and that is actually win a college football playoff semifinal game. Now, will it happen this year? It's tough to say. There are still some things that are not out, they're outside of Iowa State's control. Now, Iowa State coming into the year, they know they win all their games, they're going to be in the driver's seat. But very few teams achieve that, even the teams that are stacked with talent, seniors or not. And so, realistically, there's still going to have to be a few breaks along the way for the Cyclones to get an opportunity to make it into a college football playoff. But I really think that Matt Campbell is developing a culture that's similar in a lot of ways to what we saw at Clemson in the mid 2010s, when that, like 2012 through 2014 period kind of, it was like a building process. I wouldn't say that 2012 through 2014 Clemson was really all over the place nationally, but they were establishing themselves as a contender in their conference, which is what Iowa State has done, even though they still have yet to win a conference title. But it took a few years for Clemson to get into the discussion for a conference championship, win some big bowl games. You're thinking the LSU Chick-fil-A Bowl was a huge game, 4th and 16. You ask any Clemson fan about 4th and 16, they can tell you where they were when they watched the game. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those moments for a program. Now, did Clemson win 2 national championships under Dabo because they completed a pass on 4th and 16 from Taj Boyd to DeAndre Hopkins? No, but it was the mentality. It was the mentality. And that's the same mentality we're seeing Matt Campbell develop here at Iowa State. Can we develop these kids to be great juniors, great seniors, and continue to help the program progress? And so I think Iowa State is really one of the best examples of a team that can benefit from these super seniors. They definitely still have room to grow, as we've established, but I think as we mentioned in the previous episode, the ceiling is the roof. The ceiling is the roof for Iowa. I don't think it's quite as funny. It doesn't apply to UNC. If it applied to UNC, I think it would be funny. But with Iowa State, the joke doesn't quite hit home. But either way, really, you look at the Big 12 and you look at who it's been dominated by for the last 6 seasons in Oklahoma, and I think if you're Iowa State, you really have to feel good. You really have to feel good because of the trajectory of the program. They're going to have a great defense, and they've returned, the quarterback, a lot of the guys on the O-line, a lot of their weapons on offense. It's going to be, I think, an exciting year for the Cyclones down in Ames, Iowa. Another team that I want to talk about here that has a good chance at really benefiting from these super seniors is Miami. Now hold on. I know what you're going to say. Oh, Miami. They win 3 games, they get ranked in the top 10, and then they get blown out. And you're not wrong. But Miami doesn't have as many super seniors as others. They don't have as many, but the quality of these seniors really exceeds most teams' quantity. Like that kind of goes back to the original discussion we had of, do you want to be Louisiana with 96% of your production returning, or do you want to be Illinois, who went 2-6 but has, what was it, like 17? I think it was 17 returning super seniors. Now, obviously, De'Aaron King, their quarterback, who last season tore his ACL in their bowl loss to Oklahoma State, he will be returning. And he decided to use the waiver before the game, and he, has had a stellar career at Miami. Over 7,600 yards passing, 73 passing touchdowns, 32 rushing touchdowns, 2,000 rushing yards. If he is full strength, I really think Miami will start to kind of gain momentum again and become more consistent. I think that's really the goal for Miami this year. Their goal should not be to win an ACC championship. That's not realistic right now. Right now, it's not realistic. Their goal should be to compete consistently within their conference. That should be the goal. Any developmental program in any conference should have the goal of, we just need to compete consistently. We need to win our division. We need to compete for our division first. Then we need to win it. Then we need to compete in the conference championship. We don't want to go to the conference championship and get blown out. What good does that do you? You have to be able to compete consistently across any level. You know, your division, your conference, bowl games. Bowl games are an excellent opportunity to see where you stack up to other similarly ranked programs in other conferences. If you go to a New Year's Six bowl game and get beat by 3 touchdowns, either you had a really off game or the game plan from the other team it was better than yours and you just got beat. So, you know, for Miami, there's certainly, again, with just the same as Iowa State, there's progress to be made. They need to establish, you know, more consistency. But with D'Eriq King coming back, you got starting right tackle Jared Williams. He's coming back. His seventh season. Started 10 games last fall. And Jared Williams, the starting right tackle, is in his 7th season of college football. Transferred from Houston, actually, with D'Eriq King. On defense, you got safety Bubba Bolden, who led the team in tackles with 74 forced fumbles. He had 4 forced fumbles in 2020. He was second-team All-ACC. You got Zach McLeod returning for his 6th year. He's going to help at linebacker or possibly defensive end. Depends on the depth chart. And, you know, McLeod has 165 career tackles, over 40 starts. Defensive tackle Jonathan Ford started 9 games last season, had 19 tackles. He's back. I mean, Miami has some talent returning. And, you know, these guys have experience. If D'Eriq King is healthy, that's the key. If he's healthy and he stays healthy, Miami should be competing within their division and their conference. I really think, you know, Miami has an opportunity this season to kind of get back on. It's tough. It's tough because, again, as what always happens, they win 3 or 4 games, they get ranked like top 15, and then they just plummet when they lose a few. But you know, you look at their schedule, right? And like they open against Alabama. Okay, well they're not going to win that game. Nobody's expecting them to win that game. Now, if they come out and compete, it'll be really interesting. But I don't think the expectation should be to win. The expectation should be to compete, which is what we've talked about. So the Alabama game, don't put too much stock in that. Really, though, look at your ACC opponents. Like you got App State, Michigan State, and who is this? Who is this fourth opponent? The Central Connecticut Blue Devils. I've got to be honest with you. I've never heard of them. I have never heard of the Central. What? And this game, okay, this game is at Miami. I got to look up this team. Central Connecticut Blue Devils. They are, so they are FCS. I'm sorry. Yeah, FCS. They are the FCS D1, like the subdivision, not FBS, but FCS. And they are in the Northeast Conference. Honestly, I've never heard of them. I was looking at Miami's schedule and I was like, who is CCCU? And apparently it's Central Connecticut. But either way, those games you don't need to really look at. App State, Michigan State, Central Connecticut. You really need to pay attention to how they do against UNC on the road. You need to pay attention to how they do against NC State at home. They got Pitt on the road. They got Virginia Tech at home. They travel to do. They don't play Clemson. But they do play, you know, some of the teams in the ACC that did well last year. North Carolina was 8-4 overall. NC State was 8-4 overall. You know, Pitt, Virginia Tech were 6-5 and 5-6 respectively. And again, Miami avoids Clemson. But still, I think this could be a good year for the Canes if they're able to play consistently in the fall, and they certainly have the talent coming back. Let's pick a different team. Let's pick a Pac-12 team here. I'm gonna go with Cal. Now Cal is an interesting team because Cal had a pretty good year in 2019. If you look at the Bears and how they performed, they were ranked for I think several weeks. I don't think they finished ranked in 2019 off the top of my head. But if you look at how they did in 2019, you know, they did not because that's right. So Cal started 4-0 and then dropped four straight. Because I do remember they came to Ole Miss and actually won that game 28-20. And at the time of that game, they were ranked. I think they were obviously still ranked the following week. But then they dropped games to Arizona State, Oregon State, and Utah back to back to back to back. And they were 4-4. And so the rest of the season was basically a wash. Now, they had pretty high hopes in 2020 of kind of, getting over that hump and trying to be a little bit more consistent and string wins together. And that never really materialized because they only played 4 games. Cal only played 4 games in 2020. They lost to Stanford in pretty heartbreaking fashion. They ended up beating Oregon, actually, who was the eventual Pac-12 champion. So that's kind of a bright spot because it was the only win. I mean, they were 1-3. They had how many games? They had 8 games scheduled. Yeah, every Pac-12 team had 8 games scheduled, and 4 of theirs got canceled. Washington at home, Arizona State on the road, Washington State on the road, and Arizona at home. So all those games against Washington and Arizona teams, both state schools for both states, those games were canceled. They only got to play at UCLA, at Oregon State, home against Stanford, and then home against Oregon. And they only won home against Oregon 21-17. They lost the Stanford game 24-23. Again, it was a really close, heartbreaking loss for them. So they obviously there was a lot left to be desired for Cal after this past season, and they get a chance at almost a redo in the fall of this year because they're returning 10 super seniors. And you got 2 linebackers coming back, QE Ding and Cameron Good, both who were all they have earned all Pac-12 recognition in the past. So their defense should be pretty solid. They also have their safety, Elijah Hicks and Josh Drayden, both coming back. And so I think for Cal, the real questions are going to be what's it going to look like on offense. And obviously there's still work to be done. Again, all the common thread here with every team we've mentioned is that they still have work to do. There's still areas they need to improve upon if they want to be able to at least compete in their conference, right? I mean, we talked about Iowa State. They still need to do some things to win the Big 12. We've talked about Miami. There's certainly some things they still need to do to win the ACC. We've talked about Illinois a little bit, and I'm not expecting them to compete for a Big 10 title. And now we're talking about Cal. So again, we're picking teams that are, kind of in the middle tier of their respective conference, and they've shown some glimmers of great play in the past, but they just haven't been able to string it together. So I'm trying to pick one team again from each conference that really I think will benefit from these super seniors, and Cal would be my pick from the Pac-12. So you're probably thinking, okay, we've done the ACC with Miami, we've done the Big 12 with Iowa State, we've done the Big 10 with Illinois, and we've done the Pac-12 with California. So who are you going to pick from the SEC, the almighty SEC? Um, I'm going to pick Ole Miss. I'm going to pick Ole Miss. I'm going to pick Ole Miss because the Lane Kiffin era started about as well, at least offensively, as you could possibly want it to. I mean, Matt Corral had his moments. He had his moments, had his rough spots, but overall the offense was. I mean, look at what they did against Alabama. I mean that game was at home for Ole Miss, but putting together that kind of performance against Alabama's vaunted defense, was really impressive. The Outback Bowl triumph at the end of the season over number 7 Indiana, a team that had a lot of players missing in that game, but it's still beating a top 10 team in a bowl game as a first-year coach. Hey, man, I'll take it. First-year coach at Ole Miss, obviously. I know Kiffin has coached other places before. But point is that Ole Miss is now hoping to be more competitive in the SEC West. And they have a really experienced group on both sides. You got 10 super seniors returning for Ole Miss, 5 of which were starters in 2020, and the other 5 started at least 2 games. Kiffin is going to have Dontario Drummond and Braylon Sanders at wideout that he's going to be able to come up with packages for Matt Corral and to get those guys involved. Now, Drummond and Sanders combined for 40 receptions and 11 touchdowns last season. So that's a big chunk of Ole Miss's offensive production. And one of the things about Ole Miss last year on offense is what, made them so hard to scheme against, at least in terms of the other SEC opponents, was they would just rack all these huge chunk plays. It wasn't a little dink and dunk down the field. It was explosive plays that really helped Ole Miss get, in the end zone as often as they did. But listen, the offense has got some guys coming back. But let's talk about their defense because, oh Lord, their defense needs help. If you watched any Ole Miss games last year, and I did because I'm in school here, right? For at least another month. Their defense is rough. Their defense is rough. It finished 117th nationally in points allowed. It finished 126th in yards allowed. Okay, there's 129 FBS teams. Ole Miss finished 126th. It was the worst. It was the worst defense in the country. It's one of the worst defenses in the country. It was awful, absolutely awful. But they do have some guys coming back, and most notably, I'd say, are probably Williams and Henry. The linebackers for Ole Miss, you get Sam Williams and Lakia Henry. They combined for 6.5 sacks, 13 tackles for a loss, 3 forced fumbles, and 102 tackles last season. Safety John Haynes, he started 10 games in his first season after transferring from a JUCO. He's coming back. The secondary is going to have Jalen Jones, who had 27 tackles last season. And, again, I think in terms of where does Ole Miss need to improve, the answer is defense. If the offense doesn't improve at all this fall, I don't think anybody's really going to be too disappointed. If they just perform to the same level they performed in Kiffin's first year, I'd be happy. As an Ole Miss fan, I'd be happy. It's just the defense, man. They're awful. It's like we don't even play defense. It was atrocious last year. Again, look at the rankings. They were 117th. What was it? 117th nationally in points allowed, 126th in yards allowed. So there's a lot of areas that they need to improve upon on the defensive side. But again, Lane Kiffin and his offensive prowess, he's going to build a big-time passing game around guys like Braylon Sanders. These are dynamic guys that can make big plays, explosive plays. It's going to be really hard for defenses to scheme against. And I think Ole Miss is a team that you need to watch out for in the West. Right now, the SEC West is Alabama, and then we'll see what A&M does. A&M is a bit of a wild card. I haven't seen enough consistency from A&M for me to feel like they're a legitimate threat. Now, they were solid last year. Had that one loss to Alabama that kept them out of the SEC championship game. But Ole Miss played Bama better last year than A&M did. Okay? I mean, they did. You look at the head-to-head there and who Ole Miss has played that A&M played, what opponents in common they had. And Ole Miss played Alabama a little bit better than A&M did. So right now, I think Ole Miss is in a great spot. And the again, I've talked about this several episodes. Being a student here, fans, students, the community really are rallying behind the program. There's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, similar to what we're seeing in Ames, Iowa, with Iowa State. With Matt Campbell at the helm. I think Miami is still, trying to get their footing. I think Illinois, a team that was, again, 2-6 last year, they're trying to get their footing. Cal, coming off their year of 1-3, they're trying to get their footing. But they all still have something in common, which is they're really going to benefit from super seniors and a lot of their returning production. And I think it's going to be an exciting year for college football. It's going to be a very different kind of year, but it still will. I think it'll change the way a lot of games are played, just because of the experience that we just have never seen before at the collegiate level. But let me know your thoughts. If you got thoughts on this, hey, if you're listening to AFR as a podcast, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, this podcast is available on like 7 or 8 different platforms. You can tweet at the show. You can tweet at our Twitter account, which is at After Review Show. Definitely going to be posting some content on Instagram here later today and over the weekend. Or if you're watching on Facebook, leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Hey, give me your 5 teams. Pick one from each conference. Let me know who you think will really benefit from super seniors in the fall of 2021. It should be an interesting discussion. Like I said, I think it will continue to evolve as spring practice continues, and we'll see what it looks like this fall. It's going to be exciting. But either way, I think that's been it for this edition of After Further Review. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you right back here next week. Enjoy the weekend. I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.